So nice to see everyone. I've obviously met some people more than others. My name's Hannah Horner and I'm an independent HR consultant. Um, and I'm just going to talk through some of my offer today. So I have three parts to my offer: HR leadership support, generalist HR support, and I'm also an accredited mediator. So I focus on workplace mediation. So I'll start with a little bit of the why, because we all like to know why we've gone into this crazy world of self-employment. I have always been employed in-house up until nearly 2 years ago now. So about 2 years ago, I made the decision to go out on my own. And there's a little picture here of me and my family. I don't often share lots about my family, but um, that's the reason why. So it was to give me a bit more flexibility, a bit more ownership. I've also got this little pic of me, one of my little pro photos, because my the work that I do and the support that I give to organisations is also really important to me. And I saw this as a great opportunity to be able to add value and support lots of different organisations with the experience that I've built up over the last 20 or so years. So a bit about that. I started my career with Q Hotels. I was an HR admin at the Queen's in Leeds. I worked for the Q Hotels main office. So I went around all of those, had all of these beautiful buildings that we used to look after, as well as enjoy with all of the guests. I was also HR manager over Albrook Manor and Tankersley Manor. So Albrook Manor in York and Tankersley Manor near Barnsley. And I'd been there for quite a long time. I think I was about 8 years with Q Hotels. And I decided I wanted something different. I wanted to learn a little bit more of my trade. And so an opportunity came up with a company called East North East Homes. And they were a public sector organisation. So I just felt it would give me an opportunity to go in and learn a bit more around the employee relations side of things, and get the opportunity to go to tribunal, which obviously no organisation ever wants to go to tribunal. But the experience of doing that has been really good for me. East North East Homes was wholly owned by Leeds City Council. They wanted to work independently and very much more as a more like a private sector organisation, to be able to make sure they're making most of the public money. And that's why they employed me with that kind of private sector background. We then was with East North East Homes and for around another probably 8 years. And then we transferred into probably less than that, actually. But anyway, then we transferred into Leeds City Council. And when I first moved into Leeds City Council, I felt that it was too big an organisation for me personally. Being at 14,000 staff, very, very politically led. And I just felt that it was a bit of a juggernaut and it wasn't the right place for me. After I stayed there for 10 years, and what I've learned, probably even more so since I left, was the experience and exposure that I had to so many different things at so many different levels. And one of the key things that I actually took away from that, because I developed my career through Leeds City Council as well. And one of the biggest things was that stakeholder management. So I was working with the directors, so 5 directors at Leeds City Council, and I was working directly with them, particularly 2 areas. I worked with children and families and city development, which were 2 very different areas. And we were very involved in supporting the political leaders as well. So the stakeholder management was huge there, because you're thinking about all of the people of the city, all of the partners, and we work really closely with partners. And then the political leaders, as well as the in-house directors. So I was a deputy head of HR there, and I decided that I didn't really want that next level in such a large organisation. And it was a really good opportunity for me to take my experience. And I wanted to get back into working with the private sector. And I work predominantly with the private sector and charities now. So my values, this was really important to me to think about as I was setting up my business. So treating people fairly, for me, that's key within HR and within any organisation for you to attract and retain the best people. Aligning with the organisation's goals and values. There's no one size fits all. It's got to be right for the organisation and for their leaders. And what I call a holistic approach to HR. And that means that you can't just do one project or have one strategy relating to your people and that not feel the same every way through. So what happens quite often is people will be recruited because an organisation will do an amazing recruitment campaign and really promote all of the benefits. And then someone gets into that organisation and that's not what they see on a day-to-day basis. So everything from your policies through to the way that you lead, through to those bigger ticket kind of strategic people side of things, that all has to match up. So as I explained earlier, I have 3 parts to my offer, and the main part is the HR leadership. Some people will talk about fractional HR director, portfolio HR director, consultant HR director. I've decided to, and I'm also open to any thoughts and feedback around this, but I've decided to go with HR leadership because I think for some organisations, the thought of having an HR director isn't what they want. They don't want another director on board. They just want some idea of how that HR leadership can work within their organisation. So the overarching thing that I say around that HR leadership side of things, rather than your operational HR, where you kind of talking about disciplinaries, grievances, performance and things like that, it's the proactive. It's the creating those workplaces that attract and retain the best people for an organisation's success. And again, that goes back to the bit that I said before, no one size fits all. So some common people challenges that organisations might come across where they start to think about some HR leadership support. Like I said, attracting and keeping the right people, that is key for most organisations. And sometimes it's understanding why that's not happening and then doing something about it, obviously. Building a positive and high-performing culture. So high performance from a point of view of making sure that the organisation meets its goals, but not requiring everyone to be a high-performing individual is a really important part of that. Staying compliant and reducing risk, that's really key for everyone when it comes to anything to do with HR. And also developing in-house HR capability. So that might be that an organisation has someone that does bits and pieces of their HR. It might be that they're starting to think that they maybe need someone more senior from an HR point of view, but they want to explore that a little bit further. And sometimes it's about developing the people who are in there to take that next step up, to be able to look after the HR more effectively for the future. So with that HR capability, sometimes within SMEs, what you find is that they get to a point, especially if they've grown quickly, that they decide that, right, we need an HR director now, or we need a head of HR, or we need something. And you'll get that person in. That person might cost 60,000, say, on average. And that person comes in and they want to work strategically. They don't want to be as involved in the operational stuff. Most of the HR issues that come up within an organisation of an SME size are operational. So therefore, then they want to increase their team. They want an HR business partner. They want an advisor or an admin. And that's where the cost starts to ramp up. Whereas it could well have been that really all they needed at the beginning was an HR advisor or an HR admin because of the issues that they have. And the what I like to be able to offer is that flexibility of having that strategic support, but on an ad hoc or flexible, regular basis. So how can I support through my organisation, Chalyn? Strengthen people strategy. So that goes back to that holistic HR side of things. What does it all look like? Improve recruitment and retention, build confident, compliant, people-led practices. So by that could be anything from the way in which performance is dealt with, making sure that all of your policies and practices or your leadership's in place to deal with those effectively. And communication as well. Communication's key within there. And then support the development of embedding of effective leadership skills. That is the absolute crux of dealing with people, making sure that leaders feel comfortable and confident about having those conversations to challenge people, but also support them along the way. So what I like to say is I like to provide HR leadership on the basis of what you need, how and when you need it. So it's flexible, bespoke and impactful, cost effective, and with a real development focus, whether that be of your own HR support or of your leadership teams or both. As I said, I also provide general HR support. It goes back into that kind of holistic HR side of things. There are some organisations that I work with that just need that. So these are the day-to-day issues. I also carry out investigations for larger organisations who either need someone independent or independent and impartial, or they just don't have the capability in-house to provide that. And some investigations can be quite time consuming. So I will do that for organisations as well as the leadership training and development. Sometimes these are the things that people want to have in place. And contracts and policies, they're not my favourite thing to do, but I realise the importance of them and making sure that, again, with that holistic HR approach, that they meet the needs of the organisation. And then often one that people don't know quite so much about, I am as I said at the beginning, I'm an accredited interpersonal mediator. So that means that I can mediate situations, anything that doesn't require legal knowledge, which generally most situations, apart from family law. So it could be anything from health concerns, so mediation within the NHS, to tenancy. There's a lot of landlord and tenancy mediation around there, but I focus on the workplace mediation because it's my natural area of expertise. And when I first became a mediator, I actually didn't rate mediation, because I felt that by the time you got there, people had gone too far and there was no way of bringing them back. I became accredited and did the course to increase my knowledge to share with managers around how they could mediate better. And I still agree that mediation is best done at the earliest stage. However, what I have learned as I've become a mediator and I do more and more mediation is no matter how far people have gone, it's a great opportunity to bring people back together. And there are often these little, I say it's not a magic wand, but there are often little sparks where people realise the impact that they've had on each other and how they could work more effectively together. Mediation is a facilitation process. So I'm there as a facilitator. I am not there as a decision maker. And the real kind of gold within mediation is that people make their own decisions. So decisions are not made on their behalf. They work out a way of working forward. And we've had a lot of success with the mediation that I've done. And so it really does work. It's a lot cheaper than litigation, and it's far better for an organisation and building a better culture within it. And from there, all of the expertise that I've built up around mediation, I use to support organisations dealing with conflict. And I always talk about that as being maximizing the benefits, because if you don't have conflict, you can't move forward. But minimizing the negative impact of conflict, because that can just have such a huge and devastating effect within any organization. And so that's a little whistle stop tour of me, and the offer that I am able to provide to different organizations. I am looking really for introductions into organizations and to chief execs or finance directors often who are most interested in this. I also I'm always interested in any present opportunities to do presentations. People are often interested in presentations around mediation, but also the wider kind of workplace culture side of things as well. Isn't it?
Any questions for Hannah? I have a question, Hannah. So when you were talking about general policies around retention of employees, I think that's incredibly important, and I also agree with you that not everybody in a team is going to be steaming ahead, super high performing, but you also need the worker bees in the team, and they need to feel valued. So I'm wondering, how you would normally go about bringing in such policies, and I suppose as an additional question, would you then suggest a mechanism by which that can be enforced, but without the enforcement itself causing an issue?
So two words I'm not so keen on there are policies and enforcement, because I always feel like policies should be there in the background. They should be there to be used when they're needed. But should, and should be fair and consistent. I think that, there's two points for me there. One thing that I always work with an organization on, if we're looking at something more generic around their workplace, is their values. So often an organisation will have those outward-facing values, but they've not thought about what their values are when it comes to members of staff. And by creating values that mean something to staff, and that staff, that teams have been involved in creating themselves, usually you use as much as possible, use the organisation values and flip them to what they mean for individual members of staff. Using those to be able to really define not just what you expect people to do, which the job description does, how you expect them to do it. Because someone can be an amazing performer. Actually, the way that they work just puts everyone else's backs up, and they're not working, and the motivation for them is really not that great. So creating that values base is really important to then develop the culture around how you recognize performance. So for me, it's getting the right performance, right way of measuring performance for that organization, because it will all depend on how they work. If there's a massive drive for KPIs, that needs to be a massive part of the performance, but always keeping those values side within that performance as well, recognizing people for the way in which they're working as well as what they're doing. And supporting managers and leaders to feel confident in really recognizing what people bring to the table. Like you say, the worker bees, if you like, that aren't going to be hitting every KPI, but without them, the organization will fall apart. They also need that communication to see how they feed into the success of an organization. So think there's an example of NASA, and someone went into NASA when they were doing, I think it was I don't know this story completely, but it was one of the trips to the moon, and someone said to the cleaner, "Oh, what are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm helping those men get to the moon," because he was cleaning, he was still part of that. And the way that NASA had explained it to everyone that worked for them was that every tiny job meant that man could get to the moon. And I always think that's a really good analogy.
Yeah,
Sorry,
complete.
that was quite a long-winded response to that, Colin, wasn't it? But yeah.
No, I do completely agree with your philosophy. Sorry, any other questions for Hannah?
I've got, well, it's not so much a question, it's more of a statement, really, or a congratulations for not using the term fractional. Um, I have actually got a product called fractional, and I'm getting rid of it because it's the worst kind of type of American import that I kind of can think of. It's just a horrible term, I think, that um, I used it myself because it were a term that people recognised.
Yeah.
But actually, when I see it on my website and when I kind of talk about it, the word just makes me cringe. Portfolio is a little bit better, I think, but just fractional, the whole thing it just makes me. So good for you for not using it, and I wish I'd gone that way from when I started this.
Thanks.
Any more questions? Okay, thank you very much, Hannah.
Thank you.